Well, Robert, thank you for agreeing to this interview. I'm interviewing a person every day to the end of 2024 to find out what people think about our future in space. But before we get started, could you talk a little bit about yourself?
Well, I started off thinking I would be a space historian, wrote a book about planetary um, exploration, published back in 1994, and then got hijacked by the astronomy community, and I've been dealing mainly with them ever since. I'm fairly well known as a celestial photographer, uh, written 3 books about celestial photography, and I've become fairly well known um, uh, through my lunar photography as well. That got me invited to speak at 5 different cities in China, invitation to go to Brazil and speak at a conference, but that got canceled because of COVID. Speaking all around the United States at Space Fest last year, various astronomical conventions, just too many to count. So just had my finger in it pretty much all my life. Um, Started my celestial photography back in 1959 and just been doing it ever since, and keeping an eye on the moon the whole way, and followed up through the Pioneers and the Ranger, Surveyor, Lunar Orbiters, and so forth. Finally, Apollo on the moon, and now waiting for it to happen again someday. Doubt if it will happen within my lifetime, though.
So you're not so confident on the 2024 date.
Not at all. I mean, have you seen any contracts to build hardware for lunar landers? Have you ever seen designs for lunar landers? I know people in Houston who are hoping to fly the darn things, and they're still scratching at the surface on this. There's nothing flyable. And if nothing is concrete at this point, that deadline is never going to be met. There's not enough funding for it. It takes money to do this, and that has not been authorized. Uh, we've gone through a succession of presidents who wave their hands about going back to the moon and use that as a smokescreen to cover up their own failures, but we don't see any funding for it. We don't see any concrete progress. And when we finally start getting somewhere, another president cancels it. So this is just one giant political football that's never going to get off the ground until there's some serious money thrown at it and some actual hardware contracts, some things being built, not just this, um, um, the name of it escapes me at the moment, the heavy lift system they're building. Um, the flight rate on that thing is so ridiculously low, like one every 2 years, that is never going to be a viable system. So until something else comes along, it's just not going to happen. And I'm sure that Bezos or Musk will eventually have something in the pipeline that will work, but 2024, it's just not going to happen.
Have you been following the developments of SpaceX in Boca Chica, Texas, with
Oh
their
yeah,
development of the Starship?
yeah. I'm glad to see they finally got one off the ground without it blowing its lid. But again, that's a very ambitious undertaking. Um, Building rocket ships essentially in a foundry, uh, not uh, necessarily following precision clean room high tech stuff. This type of construction has to be mastered, of course. Otherwise, we're not going to get the kind of cheap transportation that we need to pull off interplanetary exploration, manned interplanetary exploration. So I wish him all the luck in the world getting Starship to work. Uh, it's going to go through some pretty ridiculous failures along the way learning how to do this, but unless a high mass production type of system to build these things is perfected, again, it's not going to be a viable system for what we want to do, how far we want to go. So good luck to him, and I'm sure he's got lots of talented engineers, and over in the secret Bezos rocket factory somewhere, and God knows where, he's got another bunch of very talented people trying to crack the same nuts. They're just not doing it in as wide open and uh, uh, public fashion as NASA had to do because it was a public entity. But they'll get there eventually. But again, 2024, I would believe 2028 maybe, if there was funding starting now, which there is not. So you've got a long way to go to convince me this is going to happen in the time frame that they say.
So I have a question that I get asked a lot that with your previous life as a space historian, maybe you
Mm-hmm.
could help me get a good answer to.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that comes up about our time of going to the moon this time is the fact that the last time we went was 1972. And the question I get asked is, why did we stop? And I kind of have my own answers I give to that, but um, what do you think is the best answer?
The whole Apollo program was a political exercise, and politics changed. Vietnam came along, a horrifically expensive war. Um, Congress was anxious to siphon money from anything to support that war, and the space program suffered. Even though hardware was built and ready to fly, people trained, they all turned into museum pieces because um, Congress wouldn't authorize the funds to continue. After the Apollo 11 after the Apollo 13 failure, Congress couldn't scramble backwards fast enough to avoid another situation like that on their watch. So it was it was political inertia to get to the moon to begin with, strictly from a continuation of the Sputnik moment and various other embarrassments. Um, like I said, a long succession of presidents have put out great rhetoric about going to the moon, primarily to hide attention from their own failures in other areas. John Kennedy was no exception. Uh, Going to the moon was a grand speech to divert attention away from the massive failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion, a huge embarrassment to the United States, on top of course, Yuri Gagarin being first man in space. So the whole moon program, as dear as it is to us space buffs, us astronomers who want to go back again, study it more, explore further, it was all driven by politics. And politics is a very, very fickle thing. It can change on a dime, as we see in our current administration. Uh, Everything that one administration does can get wiped out in a heartbeat by another. So until there is some degree of stability in this, a continuation from one administration to another, it's not going to happen because things change on a dime. We went from Artemis going to the moon to this ridiculous asteroid redirect thing, and then that got canceled after billions of dollars, and now we're going back to the moon again. But where's the hardware? Where's the lander? Where's the money to fund it? I haven't seen it yet. And 2024 is rushing on us real quick.
Oh, indeed, we only have like 1,586 days before the end of 2024, so it's
True,
definitely ticking down.
and
Uh,
no funding yet.
and I've talked to some people from like the European Southern Observatory, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the thoughts that they had was in order to provide stability to programs like this is making them multinational by kind of making it a coalition of countries working on the program together. It makes it a little bit harder for it to turn on a dime and kind of helps to provide some external pressures to create stability across political changes within inside each of the countries. I was
Well, that
wondering,
that works to some extent, and the ISS is an example. If we weren't, if the Russians and us weren't wrapped around each other in the ISS, we'd have probably walked away from it a long time ago. Um, Not that they're contributing all that much, but there is a certain degree of inertia in it. Um, I think the Russian funding part of it is minuscule compared to what we're putting out. And now that we have finally achieved our own means of getting back to the space station on our own, I'm just not sure how long the Russians are going to stick around on this, because their space program depended a great deal on the relatively little amount of money that we paid for rides, but on their budget, it was a huge deal. they may not even be able to fly those rockets on their budget without our help. So it's a slippery slope, uh, politically and economically. But yeah, if we get some more politically and economically stable partners, yeah. But getting people on board for stuff like that is really tough. The space race is over. The politics of it is done. It's no longer a big flag waving thing. Uh, we're almost 3 generations removed from Apollo, and people today don't have any clue of what the driving factors were back then. I mean, science literally rode on the coattails of politics, and uh, once the flag was planted, some people said, "Yep, one and done. You know, we've done that. Big deal. Move on." But fortunately, we flew another 5 missions, tried 6, got them back alive, thank God. But a long-term exploration of the moon is going to be a very expensive proposition, and getting international partners who are willing to commit that kind of cash is tough indeed, particularly in today's times when we're just barely trying to earn a paycheck and keep groceries on the table because of silliness like this COVID stuff. Um, the world is pretty unstable. We can hope and wish for a Star Trek-like future where everybody is prosperous and happy, but uh, our world doesn't work that way. So we have to deal with reality as well. We can listen to the happy talk coming out of Washington saying, yeah, we're going to go in 2024. And then I could look at the reality of, well, who's building the hardware? Where are the funding bills in Congress to pay for it? They're not there. They've never been there throughout all of these cycles if we're going back to the moon. So until somebody lays down the bucks and so starts punching rivet holes, um, I don't see it happening anytime soon, although I desperately would like to see it happen. One of my dear friends in Houston, fellow, he's an astronaut, but he's a fellow amateur astronomer. He's kind of at the head of the line to possibly be one of the ones to go. And I would, you know, every time he flies on the International Space Station, I'm on his unofficial support team, helping him with his science experiments up there. And it would just thrill me to death to see him go to the moon and kind of be part of his unofficial backroom team. So I very much want this to happen, yes. But herding the cats in Washington to make it happen is something I do not have an answer for.
I mean, that sounds amazing. I don't know how you feel about making introductions, but it sounds like somebody I'd like to talk to.
Oh, it's the astronaut Don Pettitt, and you know, he, like I said, he's been on the space station for a total of over a year on 3 different missions, and he is currently working on the uh, uh, lunar surface suit that what they call it, the Z suit or something. He sent me some pictures of it the other day when he was um, fooling around with it in the neutral buoyancy simulator, where they've put a bunch of cinder and rocks on the bottom of the swimming pool to simulate a lunar surface, and they're weighting them down, so they're simulating 16G, and they're dropping around down there and underwatering these things, getting a feel for them. So he's very heavily involved in that, but um, so far I don't see a spaceship for him to fly.
Now, you mentioned that the world's really unstable right now. And you know, I think about like the causes of that. And it looks to me, and I was wondering if you would agree with this, that all the causes appear to be human made. Like there's no natural reason for the world to be unstable in terms of, it'll
Well,
say
this
we're,
is true. This is true. And in my view, a majority of the instability can be boiled down to one single person, and I hope they vote him out of office. So I think we could leave things at that, because I don't know your political persuasions, but uh, that's how I view where a lot of the instability, both domestic and international, is coming from right now.
But it seems like we might need a more robust system that would keep one individual from disrupting it.
Well, theoretically, we've got that now. It's called the checks and balances of the judicial, legislative, and executive branch. But we've got a bunch of cowards in Washington who are letting one branch romp all over the other. And the checks and balances aren't working right now. I'm just hoping that the ultimate check will be November 3rd.
But I guess I also think about what it actually takes to win a campaign and get into Washington. The amount of money required is quite significant, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if that whole process ultimately results in having people trying to create, like the SLS, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some people claim that this is just a great way to funnel money to one particular senator's constituencies in Alabama, as an example.
Well, it's built in Alabama, of course, at Marshall, but components come from all over the United States. I mean, it's the whole supply chain for the space program was divvied up quite nicely back in the 1960s with Apollo, and that system still works today. I mean, the money gets spread around, so it's not just one particular senator. Although the uh, Space Center in Alabama, and gets a good deal of the glory in the press because that's where the thing's being hammered together. But parts for it come from all over. So the economic benefit is spread around a little bit, but I worry that it's just a glorified jobs program because it's a booster to nowhere. It can't fly enough to do anything significant. And for really getting back to the moon, the payload of it is too low. It doesn't have the capacity for a single launch to the moon and back. Uh, it's just um, not right for the job, and it really irritates me that so much resources is being put into this dead end.
Right? No, I definitely feel those same things, especially when you consider the development cost of SLS versus, Falcon Heavy or, um, Falcon 9, and the reusability, not even attempting to reuse
Mm-hmm.
large parts of it, like
Yeah,
the shuttle engines.
yeah. The um, reusability thing is also irritating. I mean, remember back in the 60s, there were all kinds of plans, designs, how to recover Saturn V first stages, stuff like that. Uh, all went out the window. Build 12 of them and then forget it. No, excuse me. I think they built 15 of them, excuse me, because 3 of them are museum pieces now. But uh, just never part of their paradigm, I guess. It's they're glorified V2s. They're built to be thrown away.
Wow. Yeah. But when you look out like at the future of humanity, say, taking all the experiences and knowledge and just thinking about how forces play against each other, and you look out, say, something really far on the horizon, 500 years,
Mhm.
what is your most optimistic projection for where we are at that point?
500 years? Well, even that far out, I don't think we would have found a viable way to do anything at Venus, or on Venus, I mean, uh, except use it as a planetary blast furnace or something. Uh, but Mars, well, I would hope that we do have settlements there and have found a viable economic reason for being there. Uh, the benefit of mankind. I don't know what is on Mars, whether it would be by then a source of resources that could easily be transported to Earth by whatever transportation system they have 500 years from now, because certainly Earth's resources will be dwindling. I mean, we're getting to the point now that some resources are becoming very finite. Uh, they're expanding out to another rocky planet for those resources would make sense if by then, and if they haven't within 500 years, it's a lost cause. Uh, Finding a cheap, viable way of transport between the worlds. But like I said, if we haven't figured that out in 500 years, it's just not going to happen. Uh, if we don't have interplanetary airlines by then, it'll never happen.
Now, when you talk about resource depletion on the Earth, which resources come first to mind that you think are the most critical that we're depleting?
Uh, oh, I'm thinking more in terms of precious metals, the stuff that are used in electronics and technology, not necessarily oil or gas. I mean, we'll find other alternative energies. That's just a natural part of the progression of our technology. Oil will eventually either run out or become not viable simply from a worldwide health standpoint or something. But the precious metals and minerals that we need for the electronic technologies and stuff that are altering our existence almost on a daily basis. Those, yeah, we're gonna be in a pinch for those sooner or later. And um, even now, politics enters into the supply chain on some of those. So things like that, I think, would be the most critical.
Yeah, I just wonder about those metals and why we're not just recovering them from used equipment. Because, I mean, I understand like oil and gas, we burn that up and, of course, it's not available, but, like copper and uh, silicon and, well, I mean, that's like sand,
Mm,
so you got plenty of that. But I mean, it just seems to me that when we use these materials in the electronics, they're not actually destroyed in the process. They're just,
no, well, they're still there, but sitting in landfills, you have a point. A more efficient, more effective way of reclaiming these would not be a bad thing. Um, I really don't see why people haven't developed some sort of technology to make that more economically viable instead of just burying this stuff in a landfill. But uh, I'm in no position to be a mover or shaker in that field. So all I can do is hope that eventually we get to the point where we're not a throwaway society. We become more of a reuse society. Throw it into the throw it into the whatever the heck, and it's uh, uh, deconvolved into its basic elements through some sort of, I mean, almost like a Star Trek transporter. If it can put things together, it can take them apart, separate the basic elements, and uh, offer them up again for manufacturing. Uh, Sooner or later, some sort of mechanism like that will be viable, where uh, through some applied force we can deconstruct things and extract specific elements from them separately. But again, that's kind of a Star Trek feature thing, something that hopefully by 500 years from now we will have mastered.
yeah, I mean, we talk about like 3D printing and kind of on-demand manufacturing,
Mm,
what have you, kind of see a system where you have like these raw materials that are available in some type of device that can reassemble them into various forms, whatever you need. And then you use the thing and you throw it away, it gets deassembled, and then the results get sent back into the feedstock or
mm. Yeah,
like a,
exactly. Exactly. If it's designed from the ground up to be disassembled again by some method like that, so all the critical um, elements can be reused, that would be great. Um, just all part of the basic technology that will eventually get us further out into space by the very nature of you figure one thing out and it becomes applicable to another. So it's happened in the past. We our lives today are very different if Apollo had never happened. So yeah, something for science fiction writers to think about.
But I wonder sometimes. I mean, obviously the technological spin-offs is one of the things that is said as a good reason for going into space and what have you. And we definitely had a lot of technological spin-offs from the first parts of the space program, the Apollo and what have you. But I wonder how much of that was because we were still trying to figure out how to do it the first time. It seems like when you're in this, like when you're trying to figure it out, you're really challenging yourselves. But there's so much emphasis now, especially on these big projects, to reduce risk and to use proven technologies. And it almost seems to me that by using proven technologies, you're pretty much saying, I'm not going to innovate. And
Mm.
I wonder what you thought about that.
Well, that's a philosophy from a company that's simply trying to make money. Um, there are also research institutes that are trying to innovate and dream up new stuff, and things will come from that. We did it on a grander scale, like we did back in the 60s, 50s, when science was a really big thing.
Can you hear me okay, Robert? It looks like our connection got worse.
Your internet connection is
I know,
unstable.
yeah, it says my internet connection's unstable. Um, Not sure what I could do. Maybe I could try connecting via my phone.